influencers virtuales en la era de la IA, desafíos legales de propiedad intelectual y éticos de los nuevos protagonistas del marketing digital. Mary K. Engle, Executive Vice President Policy de BBB National Programs, Estados Unidos. Kathryn Farrara, General Counsel North America de Unilever.
General Counsel North America, Unilever, United States. Moderator, José Antonio Arochi, Partner for Arochi and Lindner, Mexico.
Buenas tardes, ¿cómo están? Como saben, este panel también va a ser...
Good afternoon, how are you? The panel is in English, as you know. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for being here. I think we're going to be speaking today about something very, very interesting, which is the relationship between AI and advertising. Today we have two people that know about these matters. From this side, we have someone that knows everything from the company side, and then we have somebody that knows about the auto-regulatory side. So the idea is to have both perspectives of what is happening in the company. So, ¿me pueden ayudar con la presentación? Gracias.
Can you guys help me out with the presentation?
Thank you very much for being here. Mary, thank you very much for being here. First of all, we would like to know a little bit, Kathy, what is your role at Unilever, what you do, and obviously we can go from there.
Hi, Kathryn Farrara. I am the General Counsel for Unilever North America. As General Counsel, I spend my time these days on a host of matters, usually whatever's on fire. I often say that my title doesn't really, give the benefit of what I do every day, but I like to call myself like the mother of the brands, or the ultimate janitor.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Mary, thank you very much for being here. We know that you're part of the BB National Program, but I think your background at FTC marks something very important, so tell us a little bit about you, please.
Sure. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As I'm with BDB National Programs, which is the home of industry self-regulation in the United States. Been with this organization for 5 years, and before that I worked at the Federal Trade Commission, where I headed the FTC's Division of Advertising Practices. So I've been engaging in regulation of advertising, false and misleading advertising, really for most of my career, and did it with respect to the federal government, and have now moved into the maybe kinder, gentler world of industry self-regulation, where we still monitor the marketplace for misleading ads, but we look for voluntary cooperation to remove those ads from the marketplace, and we don't have the fines and penalties that come with a government action.
Thank you. Well, I think it's going to be important for us, we were talking when we were preparing for the presentation about how things are in Latin America, and being a conference where there's law firms and companies from Latin America, it's important to know what happens in the United States, because obviously there's enforcement in your jurisdiction. In Mexico particularly, there's not a lot of enforcement, and obviously all of the other Latin American countries, they're learning about it, so it's going to be good to know a little bit about your perspective from your side. I think the most important thing is to establish what is the relationship between AI and advertising. Everybody knows and everybody talks about AI, but it's something more than complicated. And obviously now companies are using AI for campaigns and for their day-to-day. So obviously it's just a little bit about knowing what is the relationship between these two issues. I think this issue is revolutionizing the industry, and it's changing a lot of things with the analysis of data and the interactions between what you're doing with AI and advertising. But I think that what happens is that everybody associates AI and advertising with virtual influencers. So here we had a case here in Mexico, just so you know. It's a virtual influencer from BMW saying that she was driving a car. Obviously, the virtual influencer cannot drive a car, so obviously it's in the thin line of saying if it's misleading advertisement or not. In Mexico, there's not a lot of regulation about it, but it was a interesting case, and it's not, advertising and AI is not just about virtual influencers. There's other things, such as consumer reviews. In Mexico and in Latin America, there is no legislation to regulate what you can say about a company and what you can't say about a company. What happens in the United States? If in Unilever you see that there's a third party saying things about your company and it's not verified, FTC goes against this company?
I think if we have a third party that is saying something false about our brand or our company, we have several options. We can go to them directly, try to resolve it. We can go to the platforms. The platforms have rules as to what you can and can't do in those communities, and if they're breaching one of those rules, that might be an avenue. We could challenge them before the National Advertising Division. We could attempt to take them to the FTC if it's a major, major issue. Otherwise, you're resolving it directly, going to the NAD, going to court would be a better option.
Yep. And what happens here in Latin America is that this type of issues can be used with AI, and they can manipulate the information and the reviews, and the problem is there's a lack of legislation in these jurisdictions. I think that's the biggest problem in Latin America, and it's good to know what happens in the United States. Like FTC obviously is always enforcing these issues, no, Mary?
Yeah, I mean, you have to distinguish between consumer reviews that consumers genuinely post on their own, and just they're not working with a brand, nobody's paying them to do it, they're not working for a competitor. Those are, the government is pretty much hands-off about. But if a brand is incentivizing a review in some way, maybe they give you a coupon, maybe they say give you a free product, something like that, then all of those consumer reviews become advertising, and they have to be truthful and not misleading, and the review has to identify the fact that they are being sponsored in some way by the brand. Also, a competitor, if they were putting up, saying something that was false or misleading, denigrating to the competitor, that would also be a violation of the Federal Trade Commission Act, this general statute that prohibits misleading advertising. So there are restrictions in place.
You see a lot of these cases in a day-by-day in the United States, using AI and in the consumer reviews. You're seeing them.
So we're starting to see problems with the use of AI. I mean, there's been a problem with consumer reviews in the U.S. for a long time. Clearly fake. All of a sudden, one product will have 500 reviews posted on one day. You know that those aren't real. And now with AI, that's being supercharged. And the FTC, for example, brought a case recently against a company that was selling an AI service to write consumer reviews. And you could just prompt it, give it say, write a review about X product, and then it would make up all these details. So clearly generating false reviews.
Something else that comes into the equation, and you can tell us a little bit more about, is the dark patterns. So at the end, dark patterns are tricks used by AI to try to incentivize the consumer about something, influence people. And I think it's something very big in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, dark patterns has been, it's a new term for an old practice, but basically referring to user interfaces that mislead consumers or cause them to do something that they wouldn't do if they were really thinking about it. So they're manipulative in some way, and often it means that they end up buying a product, or maybe entering into a subscription where they've agreed to pay, they're going to sign up for something over a year instead of a one-time service without realizing it, or giving up their personal information. So there's a big privacy aspect to dark patterns. And the concern about AI is that bad actors will basically use AI to analyze patterns and be able to figure out what is going to make consumers act against their own interest more and more. I mean, already there's A/B testing, you can do that, but the concern about AI is that that'll really be able to trick consumers at a much higher rate than previously.
You see in the industry, you see a lot of type of these issues, like dark patterns for you guys, or it's something like more on a very low scale company-wise, like big companies won't do it obviously because of ethic issues, no?
I would say in my day-to-day, what I see more and more often is the convergence of traditional advertising law, privacy, right, data ethics. And so where you have a privacy issue, now quite often you also have an advertising issue because you really can't separate the two. And so dark patterns could be something, there's nothing wrong with having a rolling subscription so long as you actually have entered the consumer into that subscription with them actually wanting it. They've had the option to just purchase the product one time. They clearly understand the terms and they have an easy way of canceling. So it's subscription services have been around forever, but what we're seeing, and I think artificial intelligence is just another great example of this, is that advertising and marketing these days, you really can't talk about without data.
No, and what you say about it can develop in a privacy issue with an advertising, with IP, it's a clear example that us lawyers as IP lawyers have to have a background. When you hire a law firm or you hire a lawyer, you're always trying to have somebody that has technical background in other things. It's not just about IP, but it's about privacy, it's about consumer protection, it's about advertising. It's like a complement, and we start seeing those things.
Certainly. Our in-house lawyers usually come with a deep expertise in one space, and then we spend a lot of time developing them into, more of the T-shaped lawyer. So they should be deep, probably in more than one area, but they should have, at least a fundamental understanding of intellectual property, privacy, if you're an expert in claim substantiation, right? And then social and digital, because there's almost never a time where your client comes to you with a project or a campaign and there's only one type of issue there. So you may not need the expertise to be able to go all the way in on every single issue in that project, but you certainly want to be able to spot them. And then, the firms, for us, that's where we're really looking for not just the deep expertise, but the broader view. Oftentimes, when we're coming to a law firm, it's not just because we don't know the answer. It's because we're looking for, help to understand this is usually not a black and white scenario. How do other companies navigate this? How do other companies interpret this? So a broader view with a very deep expertise.
I think it's important because at the end, sometimes the answer, obviously. I know that for a fact that companies, sometimes the lawyers from the companies know much more than the outside lawyers, and it's a reality.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's that combination,
Exactly.
I think, because you don't always have the holistic view, right, of what's happening externally. You know your company really well, and so that's where the magic comes in.
Talking about AI, the idea for you being a panelist to tell us a little bit about how inside the company is using AI, but also how the company is using AI outside. Can you tell us a little bit about the use obviously in Unilever?
So like Jose said at the beginning of this presentation, it's so much more than just influencers. The technology is evolving really rapidly. And I think it's important to highlight that we've had artificial intelligence for quite some time now, right? And we've all used tools that leverage artificial intelligence. What's different now is that we've over the past year, which the launch of OpenAI and ChatGPT, we now have generative AI and conversational AI. And that is unlocking a whole world of opportunity in-house, honestly, to just make day-to-day tasks more productive, to enhance efficiency. It may not be consumer-facing. Then there's a whole host of tools that are out there now that are kind of hybrid, right? They're really helping marketers, R&D, right, to research, brainstorm, innovate, gather their data in a different way, have better, leverage insights in a way that's more helpful. And then there's the consumer-facing tools that are also coming to life. So I have a few examples that I put up.
So, yeah.
So this is an example of what are we doing internally, right? This is not consumer-facing in any way, shape, or form, but several functions at Unilever have a license for Copilot. This is, it's obviously not doing our jobs, but little things like taking notes during a meeting, right? Summarizing a long email chain, creating an action list. This can save a ton of time. The legal team also is using something called Co-Counsel. It's another Microsoft product. It's like ChatGPT for legal. And we're working right now with our IT team internally to build our own legal data insights tool, which will help us enhance our risk assessments.
At the end, I think everybody, they're always mentioning, AI will replace human beings. Obviously, it won't. You need a human being behind all the AI, but obviously it's more practical and it gives you a little bit it helps you in a day by day, I think it's an assistant.
That's right. And so the tool that we're building right now with our IT team, it's not going to replace any lawyers. The whole point is that instead of going to a client and saying, this project is high risk, we now can say, this project is high risk. Here are some stats to help you better understand that risk. Likelihood, over the past 5 years, here's how many cases externally with our competitors, here's how many cases internally at Unilever. Impact, okay, over the past 5 years, here was worst case scenario, biggest settlement that we've seen, right? Best case scenario, the lowest settlement, on average, what you pay to defend yourself, how long it takes. Now, the business completely understands what high risk means, and you're having a much more intelligent conversation. You still need your lawyer, though.
But everything comes down. It's like you're saying it from the perspective of a company. Now, for a law firm, there's processes internally you can try to develop with AI. Who's the lawyer that wins the most litigation inside of the firm? Or it happens for us Latin America, the Latin American clients, they're always having issues with paying invoices, and everybody knows about that. How about going inside and using AI to try to see if the company is a company that has actually background, that has money, that is going to pay you?
Or to send reminders, or, right? I mean, I think there are endless uses, honestly, when we're talking about either improving efficiency, right, or really unlocking the power of our data, right? I have a Excel file with every, lawsuit we've ever had. And if I'm trying to gather some data insights about a particular type of lawsuit, it takes me quite some time to filter through that Excel file, right? And that's the power, I think, of artificial intelligence, is that I have the idea and I know what I want, but I can get something else to do it for me much faster than I could manually.
Do you see a replacement in a way, in a day by day, for administrative jobs internally in your company? So you see that companies such as Unilever are laying off people because it's easier to do it with AI? You're saying that the lawyers are not replaceable,
yeah.
But how about the docket system or?
It's probably the same, right? I'm not right now, I'm not seeing any replacement of other people just with a tool, but we are certainly helping them be much more efficient using these tools. So, we have lots of non-lawyers that work within our department who are helping with all sorts of things, from legal, finance operations to research, right, and management of just project management. And if they can leverage these tools, they can get their work done faster.
Well, this is an AI tool that you have internally. Tell us a little bit about it.
So this is an example. There's a whole middle bucket of tools out there that lots of companies are using or they're creating their own, where the output may be consumer facing, but the real value is the time or efficiency that you're unlocking internally. So you'll see there are tools that are helping brands, enhance their media strategy. So, using data insights, being able to understand exactly which platforms you should be purchasing media on, what time of the day, right, and the tone of your messaging could all be informed from data insights, right, that an AI tool could be curating for you. Another example is content creation. So Samantha AI is a tool that was developed internally. It's proprietary to Unilever, but there are lots of tools that do something similar. This tool uses our brand brain. So it has, for each brand, it has all of the information about that brand. The brand's tone, its audience, every approved claim, right, all the products, and it will help our marketers create the description for the products on e-commerce, which is very important because those descriptions not only need to be accurate, but they also have to be set up in a way so that they optimize search engine optimization. And AI is really the perfect tool for that.
And more with the size of the company and with all of their employees and all the data they have, it's the best way to be practical and try to resolve this.
It helps also if you have, marketing is generally a place where there's high turnover. And so if you are hiring people and every other year you have somebody else who's in charge of content creation for your brand from, 1 month to the next, the tone of your brand can be off just because of the person that's developing the content. And so in that way, it really helps with consistency and staying on brand.
So before I enter with this for Mexico, just so you can see how there is a lack of legislation in advertising and obviously in AI, Mary, tell us a little bit about the enforcement in the United States, about the FTC, what is the role of the FTC if I can file a complaint before a civil court for advertising matters? Because obviously there is teeth in the United States and there's enforcement in a day by day.
Yeah, sure. So the FTC is the General Consumer Protection Authority in the U.S. There are also some other agencies that have regulatory authority or law enforcement on other, like the Food and Drug Administration, for example, and Environmental Protection Association for some issues. But by and large, it's the Federal Trade Commission. And it can bring lawsuits, civil lawsuits in court in its own administrative process. Generally, consumers, the FTC will look at complaints from consumers, but consumers can't really start an action before the FTC. The FTC takes the action on behalf of the people of the US, basically. And then in addition, there's the 50 states, and they have their own version of the FTC Act, which they enforce through the Attorney General, as well as the District of Columbia. So you basically have 52 different law enforcement authorities on the case and enforcing consumer protection laws.
And when is it, so at the end, federally, obviously the FTC federally goes against cases in different states, or you see it all the time in different states, or it's just one issue in a way? If if the FTC goes against you, it can be locally or federally?
Yeah, I mean, usually it's an issue that's at least regional, or it may be in all 50 states, but the FTC can file suit in any state. It has the authority to file at any state, whatever is most convenient for the FTC, basically. But it often will be where the company is located, is that they'll file
This is
suit.
just what we were talking today about, just so you can see how Mexico is regarding AI and advertising. You have Profeco, which is a consumer protection, COFEPRIS, which is the Mexican FDA, you would have, in the United States, you wouldn't go to the FDA and they don't regulate advertising issues. In Mexico, they do. You have the Mexican PTO for unlawful competition. It's just a little bit of how you can see how Mexico is, and obviously the legal framework in Mexico regarding advertising. We're talking about CONAR, which was the auto-regulatory body. It doesn't exist anymore. So at the end, then there's where you see that countries that are in Latin America lack a lot of advertising issues, and I think it's important to know about what you guys do in a day by day.
Yeah, so I mean, self-regulation in the advertising industry has a long history. I mean, in the US it goes back over 50 years. I think in France it's even maybe 70 years. So other countries, they've had it for a very long time. Generally, where the advertising industry has said, we need to get our house in order. If there are allegations of misleading advertising, we want to do something about it to generate trust in advertising. It's good for business if consumers trust advertising. So there's a long history of developing self-regulatory bodies, or auto control, or CONAR in some of the countries, depending on the country, where the advertisers will support an independent body to look at advertising and decide whether it's misleading or not.
It's not binding in the United States?
It's completely voluntary.
Okay.
But if the company doesn't agree with the decision or doesn't comply with the decision, it can be referred over to the Federal Trade Commission. So then the government can look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing.
Yeah.
So I started my career, I should disclose this, at the National Advertising Division before I came to Unilever. And, you know, since I've been at Unilever, I've only seen how important the self-regulatory forum is. Because the truth is, if you're going to the federal agency, you have a big problem on your hands, right? And if it's a little problem, they are not going to be interested. No one wants to go to court over advertising that will be over in 3 weeks, right? The National Advertising Division has given us the most sophisticated set of case law in our country. Very sophisticated on complex claim substantiation issues, and often creates precedent then when there isn't any. And that has been a huge benefit to our whole industry, because oftentimes something like artificial intelligence, it's new. Most companies, believe it or not, are not trying to go out there and do something wrong. But if you don't know what you don't know, and there's no industry guidance, right, or precedent to look to, you're much more likely to make a mistake. And so we rely very heavily on the NAD precedent.
That's why, imagine the auto-regulatory body, CONAR, left Mexico. Now, if you have a case and it goes to a civil venue, CONAR would go with the judges, or the decision would get to the judges to educate them. Right now, there's nobody educating, you know? That's why, That's how we are lacking, and it's not just Mexico, it's all of the regulatory framework in Latin America. That's why sometimes it's so nice to talk to people from the United States, Canada, Europe about these cases, because at the end they show us what we must do, and it's.
I don't know that we ever have it all right either, but at least it gives you an idea of what to expect, right? Like what might be coming, and you know, learn from our mistakes, right? It took us a while, I think, to get to this place.
What happens with a company like Unilever when there is a Latin America, I don't know, a campaign that is going to be in Canada, Mexico, the United States? I can imagine you have to have, it's about timing, it's about, no?
Yes, and that's where, you know, if you're a company the size of Unilever, even if you don't have laws specific in your market, right, you have to be aware of what's happening around the globe. We have global brands like Dove. And so you can't make a decision in one market that won't, you know, work in other markets.
What we try to do is, like, compliance-wise, do the most you can. Is like GDPR. When you're doing something, you just go, you get the biggest clearance.
Yeah.
So you don't have an issue.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I think that's important for companies. And then with all the events that are coming into the equation right now, the World Cup in 2026, all of the advertising is going to come out there. It's going to be interesting to see how campaigns are doing, and if they're following all of the rules. No? Well, just so you know a little bit, in Mexico, there's just a new influencers guideline. It's not binding, but at the end, it came out around a year ago. In the United States, is there guidelines for influencers? Is there, what's the?
Yeah, the FTC has issued endorsement guidelines that apply to influencers as well as some more kind of casual or informal guidance for social media influencers. But I will say that, really throughout the globe, there's pretty much, it's common that influencers have to disclose when they're working for a brand. That disclosure is extremely important. I think in many, many countries, otherwise it's considered misleading, and that disclosure has to be on the face of the ad. It can't be, the user has to take a link, click on a link to see it, and the influencer has to be truthful, and the claims they make can't be misleading, the same as if the brand were making the claims themselves. So that kind of basic truth in advertising principles, I think, apply definitely in the US, but really throughout the world.
Enforcement-wise, FTC is behind all of the influencers. It doesn't matter if it's a big one or a small
right.
one.
I mean, the FTC is not going to bring a case against a small influencer, a whole case. They might send them a warning letter. They then issue warning letters because they can do a lot of those, and the influencer will come into compliance, as opposed to bring the big, heavy case will come after the big company. Yeah.
Or they go after multiple companies at one time.
Okay.
That's a
Like a
really
class
common.
action?
That's very common. If the FTC has a topic that they're really focused on, you will see enforcement where they're going after 6 companies at the same time. They're joining forces with the state AG. Mary could speak to this better than I can, but
Yeah, I mean, even though you commented there's not as much enforcement in Mexico and there's more in the U.S., the FTC is still a very small agency with limited resources, so they want to have maximized impact of their resources. So join forces with the state attorney general or multiple of them and announce a sweep, a bunch of cases at the same time to have greater impact. And if there's a well-known product or a well-known celebrity involved, all the better, because that's going to attract attention.
Like in Mexico, when there has been big cases before the Mexican FTC, which is Profeco, ex officio, there was a big case 2 years ago from a cosmetic company that an influencer was saying that the company was selling out-of-date products, so the case was trending. It got to the Mexican FTC, and there was a big fine for the influencer, but it was because it was a trending topic. It wasn't because the Mexican FTC was behind it in enforcement. So that's the problem. I think that if in the Mexican FTC and in Latin America they start doing more of a sweep of doing big cases, that's when there's going to be more results. But I think it's about resources that we don't have. Well, at the end, I'll go around, but at the end, I think the intersection between consumers and influencers, it's just a matter of putting everything together at the end, avoid bad practices. But why you don't tell us a little bit about this AI-related,
sure.
what would it say, adopters, or what is it? Yeah.
So I figured I couldn't just come up here and talk about what we use AI for internally, right? We still want to talk about what you do see that's consumer facing. I think the beauty industry is a great example. It's, I think these 3 examples, what they all have in common are hyper-personalization and engagement with the consumer. Prose Skincare is developing, a tool that will give you a personalized skincare regimen based off of 15 million different formulas. L'Oreal will have a tool that helps you get the exact right combination for your at-home color care treatment. And Boost Labs will do a full skin analysis and give you recommendations based on that analysis. These are not unique. We see this every single day. There's a new headline about another beauty tool out there. But I think the point is that we are getting to a place where we're leveraging data to bring our experience with the consumer to the next level. It's, you could have an ad where Based on that consumer's attributes, the background of the ad will be red instead of blue. And the ad will, it'll change, right? Or the AI tool will generate slightly different versions of the ad based on that consumer's preferences. It's about getting closer to them and better connecting to them. You'll also see lots of companies using AI to help them innovate. So come up with formulas that consumers are really looking for, right? Or spot a trend before it starts happening.
It's trying to have a better service for them and try to be more present, no? Have like a more relationship with the client.
So you can't talk about these tools as a lawyer without talking about how do you address the risk, right? I think whether you have AI-specific laws in your market or not, you're still going to have regulators, around the globe applying laws that already exist, right? This is very similar to social media, and it's like what's old is new again, right? And so those same deceptive practices, just because a tool is doing it, right, they're still illegal. When it comes to artificial intelligence, we have so many areas of risk that really span practice groups. Privacy, just the contracts alone, right? Dealing with the liability, the regulatory concerns, the claim substantiation and false, consumer deception. It goes on, intellectual property. Your answer, though, to your client can't be, it's too risky, we just can't use any of these tools. Right? That just won't work in today's age. And so you have to find a way to help the business navigate a space that is brand new and is going to continue to move really fast. In my mind, there's just no artificial intelligence without governance. But what I say to the business is that governance is not just about compliance. Governance is about unlocking the true value of our data. If you want to use artificial intelligence and you actually want to be successful and you want to be able to sustain these tools long term, you need really good governance at your foundation. Because number one, you don't want to invest in 4 different types of tools that all do the same thing, right? You don't want to invest in a tool that at the end of the day is going to create major legal issues for you or potentially put all of your intellectual property at risk. And so this is how governance can really help make sure that you are moving with the rest of the world, but in a way that's responsible. There are a lot of frameworks out there for AI, governance, and assurance. Lots of people will just be building on top of what they already have for data privacy, which makes a lot of sense. I put a few thought starters on this slide on the right-hand side because I think governance is most successful, especially as an unlock when you've customized it, when you've thought about your business and how you want to use it, and when you think about those risks and where the risk is biggest for you. Having the right stakeholders at the table, having the right subject matter expertise, building your governance platform in a way that you can be agile, right? You can evolve as the laws are evolving. These are questions to ask yourself as you're, either building your governance program or refining it, refreshing it for the future.
And I think that if we don't do it, in companies or even in law firms, we're doomed. No, at the end, it's things that you have to be innovating. It's all about processes inside, and you're talking from the perspective of the company. But
right.
I work in a law firm. If you don't start bringing those things into the equation, then you're going to be doomed in the near future.
Yeah, I agree. This is just an example of what. If you're onboarding a new tool or you're looking to onboard a new tool at Unilever, this is the process that we go through. And so I thought it would be helpful to just give a visual for everyone to see. We're actually going through, there's several different groups various stakeholders with different subject matter expertise that have to be part of this process along the way. What's really important for us is that our business needs to understand very clearly what is the process, what do we need to do, who do we work with, how long will it take. Setting those basic expectations then helps you operationalize the whole process.
Look how it's a big process for 3 months, and you have to go ABC.
Yep.
If you don't
So
do it, it's going to be...
Depending on the complexity, we tell them, this process could be anywhere from 1 to 3 months.
And then this is, well, at the end you've been talking a little bit about who are the key bodies, but maybe you can give us a little bit of more information of, we have the Federal Trade Commission, but maybe talk a little bit about BBB or,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah, so this kind of reiterates some of the things I said earlier, but BBB National Programs is the home of the National Advertising Division, or NAD, as Kathryn referred to, where she started her career. One of the important things is the ability to address new trends in advertising before the regulator can, because you can just do things much more quickly and flexibly. And I'm going to, on the next, well, maybe in another slide or so, I'll show you an example of a case inquiry involving AI that NAD looked at. And we also have a children's advertising review unit, which is devoted to children's issues specifically and has guidelines specifically about ensuring that your advertising is not deceptive or inappropriate for children. And then, the main issue that comes up with use of AI in advertising and generative AI in particular is that it has the potential to create misleading claims. It does hallucinate. That's very well known. So it makes things up. We talked earlier about how a lawyer in the U.S. got in trouble because he asked ChatGPT to generate his brief, and it created case citations. It does things like that. So as Kathryn mentioned, Unilever is using it to create copy, but it's not in place of a human reviewing it. You can start out that, but then a human must review to make sure that the copy is accurate, that misleading claims are not being made. Same with depictions, pictures, maybe generating images that are too good to be true. They maybe mislead about the function or the qualities of the product. You have to be careful of those. Certainly, you'd be concerned about if they're infringing someone else's IP. And I've heard some people talk about, well, we can just say this is created or generated by AI, and that may solve the problem, but that definitely is not the case. The number one rule around the globe is going to be that advertising can't be false or misleading, and a little label disclosure is not going to fix that. So just because you use generative AI and you say so would not mean that's an excuse for there being a misleading impression about the ad. So all of those truth in advertising concerns are, the FTC has said there's no AI exception in the books. The rules apply to AI. So that's what they've been doing in bringing their actions, and same with the NAD at BBB National Programs as we look at cases as well.
You see more and more cases with AI in that, like the storyboards and publications that you see, and in the day by day you start seeing more?
It's hard to know whether they're being in the storyboards, and what we're actually seeing is kind of funny. Companies claiming to use AI, but they don't really. But it's become kind of like a buzzword. And it's like, oh, we have this AI-powered whatever, and it's not really AI-powered, but it just sounds good.
Yeah. It sells.
It sells. Yeah. And this example of the FTC, this sweep, this 5 cases they packaged together to make a bigger impact, Operation AI Comply. And, one of them is worth mentioning, Do Not Pay. They say it was the AI-powered, the world's first robot lawyer. It claimed it could file a complaint for you, demand letters, but it really did not have the capacity, and they were just ripping people off through what they were claiming that this robot could do. And we all, lawyers, of course, do not want to be replaced by robots, so we're... And
the FTC went against...
The FTC went against them and issued an order, cease and desist order against them, and now so they cannot do that anymore. There was another case where a company was selling the creation of testimonials. I think I mentioned it earlier, by the thousands. And just generating, adding details that were never mentioned in the prompts, so they were clearly misleading. So, and then a number of cases where companies were kind of selling almost get-rich-quick types of business opportunities where you could make money through using this AI-powered e-commerce site, and FTC went to court against all those companies to shut them down.
In Mexico, there's a case of a company that is trying to use AI to establish corporations. In Mexico, a public notary is like God. So you have to go through them, and it's a big process. And they're trying to sell the product that they have a platform in AI where you can establish a corporation without the assistance of a public notary, which is impossible. So those things are starting to. Yeah. Everybody knows about AI. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah, it's a buzzword.
Yeah. It's important.
So if anybody is markets to children in any way, it's really important to think about that different perspective that is involved when children are involved. And we issued a compliance warning to really point out the ways in which AI might be used to mislead or deceive consumers or to children or to manipulate them. As I mentioned earlier, we do have guidelines directed at the use of or marketing to kids, and it's important. Those guidelines can also be applied to AI. So we pointed out how problems might occur in the marketplace. One of them obviously is creating misleading images of ads. It's already an issue that children are very, they don't necessarily distinguish the real from the fanciful very well. So you have to be clear about that if a product looks like it's flying, that it can't really fly if that's not the case. And that type of thing, the concern is AI can make that even worse. And also with AI avatars, for example, friends, that kids may be misled into believing this is a real person who's talking to them. And even, Kathryn, as you were mentioning earlier, the personalization part, which will be fine for adults, will not be fine for children, right? Because there's a real potential to manipulate them. They think, oh, this is my friend, this is a real person who's helping me, and it can have very harmful consequences. So that's something to be really careful, that you can only do so much personalization when it comes to kids where you risk manipulation that can be harmful. Especially with celebrity endorsers. Kids we know are really, they love their celebrities and stars, and anything they say or do is something that they believe in or want to imitate, and so you have to be really careful about using AI generated, having celebrities do things that they wouldn't normally do. So we put out these kind of guardrails to help guide companies to know what to be careful of and think about when they're using AI in marketing to kids.
And obviously and the FTC has been enforcing this type of issues, or it's more just...
FTC hasn't said anything in the kids space. Well, other than sort of the general cautions, but they haven't had a case yet.
Okay. It's more like you advising the people what they can do and they can't do.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a case that we did bring. It was a company called Kid Genie. It's a generative AI website for kids. And the idea was kids could enter prompts and create their own stories, create their own pictures, and you could see how it would appeal to their imagination. But the problem here was that it was the privacy end, because kids could enter all sorts of information, personal information, and there was parents were not involved in the process. Parents did not give their permission for their kids' data to be collected. So that was a real problem from that standpoint.
In Mexico, we had a case about the same. It was a platform to educate minors, and at the end, the case got to the FTC and to the privacy authority. It doesn't exist anymore in Mexico, but it was because they were using, without the permission of the parents, Zoom classes in the web pages.
Oh.
So at the end, it was a big thing, because clearly it went against privacy issues.
And here's another example of a case that our National Advertising Division brought. When Google released its Gemini generative AI program earlier this year, what they did was they released a video demonstrating its capabilities. And it looked really great. A person would be saying, draw me a picture of a blue duck or whatever, and there it was, and things were produced very quickly and very accurately. But as it turned out, that was actually a fake or false demonstration in the video that they showed, because what they didn't show was how they had extra prompts that were given to Gemini in order to create these images, and they sped up the process so it looked much better. It looked like it was much quick and much more accurate than it really was. That's just a classic case of a deceptive demonstration. That's been illegal for decades. It will remain illegal, but it was, very interesting that Google got caught up in that and their enthusiasm about demonstrating their new Gemini tool.
This is just like 101 for the virtual influencers. Sometimes when this is a virtual influencer that sells a lot of jarritos in the United States, which jarritos, like is a soda which is well sold for the Latin American market in the United States, and she has many million of followers. The thing here is like just to know exactly all of the main points when there is a storyboard that you have to be checking, just like a 101 that we prepared for you guys. I understand we have still 20 minutes, but I think about best practices and the influencers, I think what would be the insight for the majority of the people in this room are lawyers that work in law firms. You work in companies, but what would be like the biggest insight for the use of AI in the day by day? Because you're mentioning a lot the use inside and outside. What can they do? What the employees can do? What they can't do? But for lawyers, I think it's the same thing.
I would say the reputational risk.
Okay.
Right? You cannot, even if you're in a market where you don't have a lot of enforcement risk at the moment, you certainly still have to answer to the court of public opinion. And consumers, all it takes is one marketer who's using a tool in a way that they shouldn't, not checking the work, right, to end up with something really bad on your hands. I also think education. Once your organization, people just keep hearing AI, and it's going to solve every problem. And then usually what happens internally is companies, internally, everyone gets frustrated. They're like, I hear about this, I hear everyone's using it, but I can't figure out how to use it, or, I'm not sure what's available to me. I think for, external law firms, having that broader view, right? The experience of your other clients is huge, especially in a place where, the law is evolving and the use cases are evolving, the tools are evolving. That is invaluable at a point like now, and not something that we would ever have internally, even if you have all the expertise internally. I also think that there's often times where you will need, in a particular space, whether it's a legal or technical space, you need to bring the experts from the outside in to get to where you want to go. So law firms who not only have that legal expertise, but who have partners with tech companies that are actually doing this work, or consultants that can support. There's all kinds of, I think, technical support that might be necessary.
And being in the same page at the end, I think if you're not talking the same language to your outside counsels, it's a problem. So I think you have to be innovating processes inside using of AI, because if they don't understand how is, I don't know, please bill me in the legal tracker, whatever. If they don't understand that, obviously the first time they told me about legal tracker, I had no idea, no? But at the end, if you don't do it.
And I also think companies want to see, everybody is looking to, make sure you're spending strategically. No one wants to be wasting money these days. So law firms also can be experimenting with a lot of these internal tools that make things faster or can leverage data better. Not that they are doing the work or replacing the lawyer, but if they're speeding that work up and it costs less for the client at the end of the day, I think a lot of clients would be interested in that.
It's more practical. Like you say, it's if you have a lot of, and like in IP, there is watch services. There's all these things that I think that if you go inside AI and you start giving that option to the client, and it's cheaper, you start,
Right.
you'll get,
And then when the
give a
big
very
thing
big
comes,
service.
you're there to help them with that.
Correctly. And from your point of view in the AI, how do you see this in the near future? All the use of AI in the advertising, you think it's gonna evolve? You think it's gonna be more locks for all of the promotions they're gonna be doing the day by day, the companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Kathryn said, it's bound to be useful to become more efficient, whether it's creating copy or creating pictures. Certainly in targeting ads, I see a lot of potential there. But I would go back to what, I said the FTC keeps saying, which is there's no AI exception to the laws on the book. So we always have to be very mindful of all of, whether it's IP, laws against false advertising, privacy, all of those things are still there, and yet using AI can implicate those or possibly make them worse in some ways if you're not careful. So it's important for all of us to be thinking about all of these aspects. And I know, as Kathryn said, the data, right? I mean, using the data that you have, mine the data. I mean, the potential for AI to be used to mine data and for whether it's understanding your customer or whatever is great, but then it also potentially raises privacy implications. And so you have to be able to really think about checking that box as well. I feel like it's great promise and great peril from all sides.
Well, and I think everybody's selling to you, use this AI tool, but if you don't know how to use it inside, there can be liability and there can be issues inside the company or the law firm.
Right, so it's going to be practicing what you preach.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
There's a lot of parallels to the privacy world in the sense that when I first started diving into privacy in the US, I learned very quickly that it doesn't matter how much you know about privacy law if you don't really understand how the tool works or you don't really know the data flow. So all of these tools, you have to ask, can I see it? How does it work? Right? Lots of questions before you can really advise on, right, wrong, do, don't.
I don't know if anybody from the crowd has any questions. If you want to say it in Spanish or English, it's fine. I don't know if any questions regarding the use of AI, the relation with advertising. At the end, we're IP lawyers, but you need to know about advertising. You need to know about privacy. You need to know other areas of law that are complementary to IP. But I don't know if somebody has a question. Palacio.
First, thank you to the panel for this great presentation. My question would be regarding AI influencers, since when they make a claim and it's deceptive, who can be held liable for that? Because obviously the influencer won't be, but is it the programmer that put that information into the AI influencer? Is it the company that made the decision to put that information out? How is this approached by the authorities? Thank you.
So in the US, pretty much everyone could potentially be liable, but most likely the FTC in the states would go after the brand, the company who is using this influencer, whose products are being discussed or liked or endorsed. It's most likely they'll be seen as the one who's most responsible for this.
The brand.
The brand.
Okay.
The brand.
Ricky.
Yes, thank you both, well, the three of you actually, for a great presentation. Kathryn, a question for you. What is it that you're expecting from law firms, from law firms that are partnering with Unilever about the use of AI. Are you expecting certain threshold? Do you want them to use AI, or in the contrary, being cautious about, using AI in the opinions that you're getting? That's one. And the second one, what do you see going on in the legal industry with AI?
In the legal industry?
Specific AI industry products.
I certainly, tools like Copilot and Co-Counsel, I think are, becoming very common. I also think that there's so much from a legal operations perspective. It's not the sexiest topic, but it is, what I've spent the majority of my time on this year, right? Figuring out how to clean up our legal tracker platform and our matter names. Figuring out how do we assign things to people internally? How do you know, right, who is available and who isn't? I see so many opportunities for us to leverage these tools to help us understand better what's going on the inside. The example that I gave earlier, for us to be able to scan publicly available information like the FDA or the FTC website, and then scan our own internal confidential information about our own cases and what we've done over the years, and produce for our business partners, a really insightful summary that shows them the worst and best case scenario in terms of what you could expect for a settlement and cost of defense. That is really eye-opening, right? It helps us better communicate with our business partners. Now we're speaking the same language, whereas before we were speaking legal, right? And when they hear high legal risk, they see that's Kathryn's job. Right? They're like, yeah, we'll take that risk, and that's your job, is to deal with that risk, right? They don't always understand the impact that we're trying to communicate. So for me, I think finding ways to leverage AI to help us do our jobs better.
And put everything in numbers and put everything in paper. That's
Yes.
what happens a lot.
Yes. And I think law firms would probably also benefit from that sort of thing.
I think law firms, if we don't do it, it's something that we're going to be doomed if we don't start using more AI in a day by day. Obviously, they say you need a lawyer in the back, or you need a person, but there's so many things that you can, in a way, do to try to be a little bit more practical. Because if you're old school in different things, you cannot work with companies such as Unilever.
Well, you can also give the option, right? If you have a tool that helps support watch services, right? And you can say to the client, here's a package, right? Where, we, for a much lower rate, we use our AI tool to do the initial monitoring, right? And then that way you're saving money. It's starting with AI, and then you have a human who's overseeing it. Or if you're not comfortable with that, you can go with this package. There's flexibility there, but I think clients like to see that you're thinking that way.
I think that's the most important thing, flexibility, and having the communication with the client in a day by day, and be more practical. You don't have to be sending the brief to the partner of the firm. It's more like, okay, resolve this issue, let's do it, and let's start. Sorry. I think the AI, it's so many. There's so many options. There's the sky's the limit regarding AI and what we can do. And for Unilever, is a clear example of how we were talking about all of the tools you guys have, and now that you're giving them to the consumers so they can have a better experience. And obviously, if they have a better experience, there will be more sales, and at the end, it's going to be better for the company. No?
Consumer love.
Yep. I don't know if there's any other questions. Muchas gracias a todos. Les agradecemos mucho.
Thank you very much, everyone.